Hello and welcome to the pod. I'm Nathan Fink.
I'm Jasmine Torres Allen, and this is New Hampshire Family Now,
a show about building family in the Granite State. Today in the pod, Jasmine and I discuss holiday spirit and then resolve to be something new. And later we hear from NH Healthcare Workers for Climate Action and talk to real Granite State parents. New Hampshire Family Now is brought to you by the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. Since 1962, the Charitable Foundation has worked hand in hand with generous and visionary citizens to maximize the power of giving and support, collaborate, and lead innovative initiatives. Initiatives like New Hampshire Tomorrow, which is focused on making sure children and families have access to education, healthcare, and career pathways to ensure every family member thrives. To learn more about New Hampshire Charitable Foundation and all their initiatives, go to www.nhcf.org. This podcast was also brought to you by Family Support New Hampshire. Family Support New Hampshire is NH's coalition of family resource centers and family strengthening programs that exist to ensure Granite State families have access to resources so both caregivers and children can succeed, because supported families are strong families. To find a family resource center near you, visit www.fsnh.org.
What do you mean darkness?
Dark Night of the Soul.
What happened?
There was like a little shaky moment. And so, where I'm self-reflecting, hermiting into myself, like to figure out what is the real issue, Jasmine? Like I talk to myself like that, like what's the real issue?
What's really
here?
going on here?
Yes, exactly.
Just for the record, how many layers of jammies were involved in this?
So let's start the show. This has been great. Hello and welcome to the season 3 finale of the podcast. Can you believe it?
Yeah, I can't believe it. Yes. That's crazy.
I'm Nathan Fink.
And I'm Jasmine.
And are you ready for this, the holiday season?
No. What's that meme that's been going around? Like, everybody's Christmas presents are still in my thoughts and prayers.
Oh my gosh. Well, I have something that might cheer you up.
Oh, he's here. I'm just kidding. That's actually my father-in-law going to the bathroom. So in all seriousness, when you look at the holiday season,
yes,
what does this holiday season mean to you as a parent and caregiver?
Ooh, honestly, it just means togetherness for me. Like I need to be together with people and see them and, take that time to slow down because everything else is just moving so fast.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those times where you kind of have to slow down and appreciate, like, it's a pause in time.
Right. It really is. What do you hope it means for your kids?
This is interesting because my husband and I talked about this as we stood in line for Santa, and both the kids were crying and they were at each other's throats. And it was one of those moments where I was like, is this what holiday season means as a parent and as a caregiver? You do these things because you think you create memories and things like that. But then I hear my kids talk to each other. We built this Oreo cookie train after we saw Santa, and it was chaotic, and there was sugar everywhere, and there was definitely like a sugar high, a sugar rush going on. And I just thought to myself, this is crazy. I don't think I want to do this again. And all I could hear my daughter say to my son was, wasn't that so much fun? Do you think Santa was watching us? And it was just like one of those moments where, like, you think things are chaotic and crazy, but to them, it's being with you and like being like doing the things together, like building that Oreo train together was so much fun for her.
What we should do is we should actually ask them.
Ooh.
I like playing with the kitties. When would be nice we earn candy canes off the tape. Christmas holidays means love to me. And the holly jolly Christmas means joy.
I really do think we create these spaces sometimes. I think as adults, we work really hard to create these spaces and then kind of demand immediate recognition.
Yes.
From brains that don't have the brain structure or architecture
yes.
to give us what we think appreciation looks like.
Right. But I think there's a level to like, why do we always assume that our kids have to be appreciative in those moments? Like, why do we get into those spaces? And like, it's that immediate gratification gratification of like, oh my God, we created a memory. You know what I mean? Like it's a feel good for us.
It is.
Versus like for them, like, oh, this is so cool. Like I just get like a candy. You know what I mean? And so there's a level of like awareness of like understanding that right now they don't really understand being grateful yet. You know what I mean? Like they might know from conversations that we have with them, but like that practice and that level of understanding takes time, and it takes like maturity too. And so I think that sometimes when they're little and we get frustrated because they're not like really expressive and like over the moon because we did something for them, it's that understanding that like sometimes an exchange is not an immediate gratificational like moment.
We have to take, I think, the long game. Play the long game, because you're right. If you're capable of excitement, disappointment, you know, your emotions mature as you go. Right. And you're able to hold them and think about them. And so taking that long game of, is this a magic moment for them? Yes. Yeah. And they're additive. You know what I mean? Because once they understand habitualness and nature, then they can actually, you know, express it.
Exactly. Yeah. And they'll start to learn and experience more moments where they can feel grateful, and they can look back to those moments as a kid when you created those magic moments and say, man, my parents were so cool. They made Christmas so magical for me. But I just say, let kids be kids and not make such high expectations for them during holidays.
Yeah. You know, we're rounding the bend then on what I would call resolution season, where we pretend there are no barriers. When you do look forward, though, because I am fascinated by this. I've had years where I don't have resolutions. I have years where I have made them pretty rigid. When you look into 2024, who do you want to be?
I want to be a good friend. Yeah. I think it's an achievable goal because I'm in a stage of my life where I'm like making new friends, but I'm also learning to be a good friend and what that means for the people I'm meeting.
You know, I've been thinking about it a lot lately because I think it was your daughter who said, I want snow?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot because I'm looking outside right now and it's not. I think this year I really want to get more actively involved in doing something about climate change.
Absolutely. And I think that's really at the top of everybody's mind right now as we're looking at, you know, we say climate crisis, but I've been spinning it as climate adaptability because now we kind of have to like look forward and look for solutions.
Yeah. Well, I'm super excited you're saying that because on the second half of the show, we bring in a whole host of folks to talk about climate change and what it means and how adaptability is something that we can really lean into to kind of face what we're facing.
Exactly.
But, you know, I think what's interesting... Uh-oh. It's my father-in-law. And when we come back, we welcome Joan Widmer, Executive Director of NH Healthcare Workers for Climate Action. Don't go anywhere.
I don't know if there'll be snow, but have a cup of cheer.
Today's episode was brought to you by Upreach Therapeutic Equestrian Center. Located in Goffstown, New Hampshire, Upreach partners with the Power of Horse to create strong children, strong families, and strong communities. To learn more about Upreach Therapeutic Equestrian Center and its many inspirational programs, visit upreachtec.org. That's upreachtec.org. Today's show was also brought to you by Burgoo Media, a full-service media company dedicated to helping nonprofits realize impact stories for print, video, social, and legacy media, and more. Both budget-conscious and grant-friendly, Burgoo Media helps your organization celebrate the humans in human services. Learn more at burgoomedia.com. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I'm thrilled to be joined by Joan Widmer, Executive Director of NH Healthcare Workers for Climate Action, who has, by the way, done a ton of things, including being a CFO, VP of Finance and Accounting and Corporate Controller, and nurse at Catholic Medical Center, as well as adjunct faculty at UNH. Joan, I also wouldn't be surprised if you were an elf, so I appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, thank you, Nathan. I'm thrilled to be here and to have an opportunity to talk about the important work that New Hampshire Healthcare Workers for Climate Action is doing here in the state of New Hampshire.
Well, it's clear to me from your bio, you've done a lot in your career. So the question then I have is, why this? Why NH Healthcare Workers for Climate Action? Why now?
Well, first and foremost, I'm doing this so that my sons and my grandsons, of which I have 5. I want them to have a healthful world in which to live. I had worked with Bob Friedlander, the founder of our organization, back during the pandemic to combat anti-vaccination sentiment. And so when he decided to organize New Hampshire healthcare workers for climate action, he reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in participating. I became a passionate healthcare advocate when I was working as executive director of the New Hampshire Nurses Association, and so decided to join this fledgling organization.
I guess the question for me is, well, what is New Hampshire Healthcare Workers for Climate Action? What's its mission and how does it go about achieving that?
Yeah, other than having a very long name, New Hampshire Healthcare Workers for Climate Action is a grassroots, nonpartisan group of healthcare workers who are using their trusted messenger voice to talk about the impact of climate change on human health. So, for instance, the Yale Climate Survey, which looks at opinions about climate change and its impacts. According to this survey, many Granite Staters acknowledge that our climate is changing, but many believe that it's only really harming plants and animals, or it's going to harm future generations, or it's going to impact developing countries, coastal countries, and things like that. But far fewer believe that it's harming themselves. And so for most people to take action, they need to believe that the failure to act will cause themselves harm. New Hampshire Healthcare Workers for Climate Action wants to make the New Hampshire citizens aware of the health harms that are happening here and are due to our changing climate.
Now, I want to pick up something you said in that trusted messenger voice, which means that there is a little distrust out there, but there are naturally people in our lives who serve that function of being embedded and believable. Why is that so important to the work that you're doing?
Well, first off, people have to trust the voice that you're hearing. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but Gallup does a poll every year that looks at various professions like the clergy, police, nurses, doctors, et cetera, et cetera. And they ask, are these people in this profession generally trustworthy? And for 22 years in a row, nurses have ranked highest in that poll.
Really?
Physicians are often number 2, sometimes number 3. So we are viewed by the general population as a trusted voice, that people will believe us and trust in what we have to say. As long as we stay within our lane, which is healthcare, then we're going to be able to get people to listen to what we have to say.
Which means we're either out of our lane or this is solidly in our lane, your lane, as a healthcare provider. So when we think about that, use that mindset of climate change and health, what are the major concerns that are facing us as families and individuals?
Sure. I mean, were you aware that New England and New Hampshire included are warming at a faster rate than much of the U.S.?
Wow.
The warming climate is leading to a prolonged pollen season, which exacerbates allergy and asthma conditions, which many people suffer from. High heat index days exacerbate cardiovascular diseases such as COPD and heart failure. And we see a significant increase in emergency department visits at the time during high heat index days. Having formerly been an emergency care nurse, I saw that personally. Excessive heat can also lead to heat exhaustion and even to heat stroke, which is a life-threatening condition. People who work outdoors, for instance, are at increased risk, or athletes playing on the fields in August. Our shorter winters are prolonging tick and mosquito seasons, and these creatures have vector-borne illnesses that they carry, such as Lyme and encephalitis, and we're seeing situations where diseases that weren't generally endemic to this region are now starting to move up the coast from southern regions. Air pollution, such as the smoke from wildfires. Having grown up in Southern California, I'm well familiar with wildfires, and we've all heard about them in the news in the most recent past. But these impact individuals with asthma and cardiovascular diseases that can lead to stroke and even heart attacks. There is even new research that is linking high particulate matter, something measured as 2.5 microns, for instance, can travel through the nares into the brain, and they're seeing some linkage between that and Alzheimer's disease in later ages. That's new research. It's still being evaluated, but there's a correlation there. Severe weather can lead to direct injuries and even fatalities. Flooding can compromise public water supplies, creating a risk for waterborne illnesses. For instance, New England has seen a 71% increase in heavy downpours between 1958 and 2012. So these are very real and happening impacts. And I've only spoken to the things that are here in New England and New Hampshire. There are all sorts of other impacts in different parts of the country, depending on the region you live in.
Yeah. And I mean, referencing this past season, I know if we look at one instance in time, that does not a climate make. But if we were to look backward, this last spring, summer, we haven't had that much rain since I've been here, and it's been quite some time.
Yeah,
right?
I've lived here since 1980, and I've never seen this much rain.
How are you? This is a microphone. You want to check it out?
Hi.
When I say the phrase climate change, like what comes to your mind?
Like global warming, essentially, like disaster.
Well, I'm watching in real time right now. The road by our lake in Dublin is washed out for the third time this year. Heat problems, hurricanes. I mean, there's so many.
Just imagining my children in that world.
I'm Dr. Deborah Gerson from Catholic Medical Center.
How did you come to find yourself volunteering with an organization like NH Healthcare Workers for Climate Change?
Well, so that story actually goes all the way back to when I did my residency training in Miami quite a long time ago. And as you know, there were quite a few hurricanes that went through Florida in the year 2005. We had Katrina, Rita, and Wilma. And I was doing my residency there in 2005, and Hurricane Wilma went through. And after the storm was the first time that I realized that there was a connection between climate change and human health. A lot of people were directly injured in the storm through accidents or flooding in their homes or falling trees or ill-advised activities like surfing during the storm. But others were injured after the storm due to traffic accidents from downed trees. Almost none of the traffic lights in the entire Miami-Dade County were working at all. Also, people who needed to get to the hospital had a really hard time getting to the hospital because the ambulances couldn't get through the streets with all the downed trees and power lines. Almost 1 million people had no electricity, some of them for up to a month. So you couldn't keep cool in your house with no air conditioning. And you couldn't keep your refrigerator cold. So my 1.5-year-old had no cold milk to drink, and she was really not happy about that. And there were just a lot of health impacts that people had that I hadn't even foreseen. And then fast forward a few years, my own kids were getting older, and I moved to New Hampshire. And I suddenly realized that I couldn't just keep waiting for the future kids to save us or that someone else was going to do something. I realized that if I wasn't going to do something about it, who else was going to? And I was lucky enough to meet a number of other healthcare workers in New Hampshire who really cared about the same things. And we got this group going.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because, you know, when I think about climate change, I think that we as a people can fixate on these highly visible impacts. Rising sea level, increased hurricane activity, like you had just said, wildfires. And if they're not in your area, you know, the smoke from the haze. But as you mentioned, there are these tick-borne illnesses. Can you talk a little bit about that and some of those other impacts that we might not fixate on as readily?
So as a pathologist, one of the things that I do is I review peripheral blood smears. And this is where we take a drop of a patient's blood and we smear it on a slide and we look under it and see what cells are there. And when I first moved to New Hampshire, I started looking at these in the summer and noticing that there were an enormous number of cases of a parasite called Babesia microti, which is a little purple ring-shaped parasite that you find in the red blood cells of people who have been bitten by a tick that has this parasite. And most people who get this are asymptomatic. Some people get a flu-like illness. And a small number of people who have other underlying health conditions can have a severe form of the illness. But what we find that's more concerning is that a large percentage of people who have one tick-borne illness will actually also have a second or even a third tick-borne illness that came from the same tick. So someone who has babesiosis may also have Lyme disease or anaplasmosis or something like that. So we have to go back and do the testing for all of those.
Right.
These tick-borne diseases are increasing across the country and in New Hampshire. Lyme disease, for example, has nearly doubled in the last 30 years.
What is that?
Bus. Toy bus.
Yeah.
It has things in
It
it.
sends me back to my own childhood. So much of what I loved about living in New Hampshire was being outside, being in the snow. We came back to New Hampshire to give our future children the opportunity for a life outside, closer to nature, and now it's a dangerous one.
You know, the physical health impacts of climate change is one aspect. Certainly there are other aspects that maybe kind of fly under the radar, no?
Yeah, well, actually, that's very true. For instance, high heat index days. So those are the days where you have a temperature of 90 degrees or above and or high humidity, changes how an individual metabolizes, how they process many mental health medications. And they put these individuals at risk for hyperthermia, which is elevated heat. So basically their core temperature rises. Lithium is a medication that's taken by individuals who have bipolar disorder. And this places them at greater risk for dehydration, which is worsened on high heat index days. Additionally, individuals with mental illnesses tend to have fewer coping mechanisms. They have fewer tools to help them deal with extreme weather impacts. There are increased incidences, this is all documented in research, of aggressive behavior, violence, suicide, as well as hospital and emergency room admissions for those individuals with mental health or psychiatric conditions during high heat index days. Climate anxiety is a new and growing condition, especially among our younger generations, which is what I'm concerned about for my own grandchildren. And for instance, in a recent study, nearly 60% of the individuals queried between 16 and 25 were either very worried or extremely worried about how climate change would impact them in their lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Bob Fader, New Hampshire psychiatrist. There's actually two major ways in which climate change is affecting people psychologically. One is the effect that actual climate events such as wildfires or flooding have on the people that are experiencing them. The other is anxiety or worry about the future among the general population, people that have not actually been victims of any climate events yet, but are worried that they may be in the future and also worried about what effect climate is going to have on the earth in general.
So in those categories, when we talk about trauma, what are the types of predictable responses that you're seeing or would see, say, if a wildfire raged through this neck of the woods?
There's actually been a fair amount of research done on this now. So we have data of what's actually happened in events that have occurred. And whether you're looking at wildfires or flooding or severe storms, in all of these, you will see a significant rise in people with diagnosed psychiatric conditions within a relatively short period of time after the disaster and persisting for a significant period of time afterward. For any of these types of disasters, the victims of them have double or higher the rates of various conditions like depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorders compared to the general population.
When we talk about this, then, is there a strategy or mitigation in place for things like this?
The field is moving slowly towards mobilizing towards that. I'm a member of a number of psychiatric climate groups that are trying to accomplish this, and unfortunately, it's happening slower than we would like. The perception of the mental health effects of climate disasters is not as high as we'd like it to be among mental health professionals, and we're working on trying to raise that, and we're having success with that. So we're in a better place now than we were, and there are a number of therapists who are becoming more climate aware and oriented towards treating the victims of these disasters.
Now, you mentioned these two buckets: traumatic response based on a catastrophic events. Then the other category we talked about is that psychological stress from the worry.
Again, there's been some pretty good research on that, and studies that have gone out looking for the incidence of this in the general population. And what we're finding is that roughly 50% of the American population considers climate change to be a significant problem, and it's affecting their functioning to some extent in their daily lives because of their concern about it. There was a very landmark study done a couple of years ago that was published in Lancet magazine that looked particularly at young people. These are people aged 16 to 25, and they had 1,000 subjects in each of 10 different countries throughout the world: France, United States, Australia. And they asked these young people are they worried about climate change? How much are they worried about climate change? Around 60% of them said that climate change was a significant concern for them. 50% of them said they thought that worry about climate change was having a significant impact on their daily functioning, which might actually qualify them for having a diagnosable psychiatric disorder if their worry was to that degree. And then one of the most disturbing things about this study was that 40% of the responders said that they were seriously considering not having children because of climate change and worry about what the world was going to be like for their children.
Did you struggle with the question of whether to have kids?
I did. Like, is that best for the world?
Yes.
Yeah.
I struggled big time with whether I wanted to have a child.
Because I'm not only worried is he going to fall off the playground slide, but it's also, is he going to get a tick-borne illness? Like, there's just so much more added to the anxiety of parents.
Do you have any advice for people who might be experiencing that anxiety and are looking to make a difference but can't possibly hold it all at once?
Well, there's a number of things that can be done. With the New Hampshire Healthcare Workers for Climate Action, we actually did a study of what are the current methods that mental health professionals are using to help people with these kind of problems. The first thing is to try and not catastrophize the situation, to see it as a significant threat, but one that hopefully can be worked through, and to, see yourself as somebody who is looking at a way to help plan for a better future rather than thinking of how to plan for a disastrous future. Another thing that is highly recommended is that people maintain or build on their social interactions as much as possible to strengthen bonds within family, with neighbors. Any type of social interaction is very helpful in feeling that you're not alone with what's happening in the world. And then, actually doing things about climate change, not just sitting and worrying about it, but, getting engaged and trying to work towards a solution. And the most helpful thing that people have found is becoming involved in an organized climate group or activity of some sort. And there are a number of these available now that kind of fit any political persuasion or age group.
Yeah. Are you hopeful?
Absolutely. We're already seeing a reduction in the amount of greenhouse gases being emitted here in the U.S. For instance, we're down from 6.5 billion metric tons in 2005 to 5.6 billion metric tons in 2021. So that's already happening. Wind-generated electricity has increased from 6 to 338 billion kilowatts between 2000 and 2020. The cost of generating solar energy has decreased over 90% in that roughly the same time frame. And this data is all before the impact of the recent Inflation Reduction Act, the single largest investment in alternative energy sources ever made by the United States. Current modeling shows, and again, I am talking modeling, that, a lot of this research is based on that. It's showing that the programs of the IRA that is funding will drop greenhouse gas emissions down to 3.3 billion metric tons by 2030. So that's almost in half of where we were in 2005. Is it everything we need to do? No, but it's a good point of moving forward. We're also will predict significant health improvements. They're estimating between 3,700 and 3,900 reduced avoidable deaths on an annual basis. Reduced avoidable asthma attacks will drop between 99 and 100,000 annually, and reduced lost workdays, which has a direct impact on our economy and our overall health as a state.
And we don't all have to do something huge. We all have to do something little. Lots of us have to do little things and work together to fix this problem. So things that I would recommend, first of all, voting with climate action in mind. So look at the candidates that you can choose from in an election and see what their policies are about climate change. Also, I highly recommend joining a climate change group. Not only can you get more done as a group, but it's actually fun and has really alleviated a lot of my climate anxiety to see that there are other people who are working towards the same thing. Other things that you can do in your job, everybody can make their job into a climate change job. For example, my brother is an engineer, and he went and looked at a process for something that they manufacture and figured out that they could save a lot of energy by changing the process. And not only did they save a lot of energy, they saved an enormous amount of money, which the company really liked as well. And then when we do those small personal actions, if we talk to our friends and family about them, we may get other people to start doing them too.
I am hopeful. I'm cautiously hopeful. There is a movement in the climate field called transformational resilience, which takes a preventative approach towards this problem because there are never going to be enough people in the mental health field to help everybody that's going to be affected by climate change. And the idea with transformational resilience is to build resilience into people now so that they are better able to deal with climate problems that come up and also better able to deal with their own emotional responses to it. It involves teaching people about actions in their life that are going to help with their emotional resiliency, as well as help people at the community level plan for potential future climate events. So when they occur, they are more ready for them and able to deal with them.
Are you hopeful?
I am, to some extent. I have to be for the little guy now.
Yeah, and I think I'm hopeful that we as a species are very adaptable and can find very creative solutions. I have to be. I mean, I don't know what else I can be. It is really exciting to see how many people are in this kind of work. And I've experienced that when I speak to other parents about climate change and their fears, you know, it just feels good to find somebody else who's thinking about this and know you're not alone.
This podcast was brought to you by Nixon Peabody, who delivers exceptional legal services for clients in the community by combining high performance, an entrepreneurial spirit, deep engagement, and an unwavering commitment to a culture of collaboration, diversity, and humanity. Nixon Peabody works with universities, hospitals, and nonprofits of every size to maximize impact. For more information, visit nixonpeabody.com. Many thanks to the Samuel P. Hunt Foundation for sponsoring this podcast. Established in 1951, Samuel P. Hunt Foundation is a Manchester-based, independent nonprofit that provides grants primarily for the arts, children and youth services, faith-based organizations, educational institutions, healthcare, and human services. New Hampshire Family Now is listed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and more. Listen wherever you get your podcasts or ask your smart speaker to play New Hampshire Family Now.